Hi everybody, and welcome to video number 3 in this DIY garden room series. And in this video I'm going to be showing you how you can make the walls. As you can see on the screen right now, these are the walls, the basic standard stud walls, and they're covered in OSB. It's quite simple, but if you've not done it before it might seem a little bit daunting, so I'm going to show you how to do it in this video. The first thing to do is we're going to cut 2 pieces of timber like the ones on the screen here for the top and bottom of the stud wall. And this is going to be followed by marking it out for the studs. So I'm using 400 centers for my build, and this is what I recommend for you as well. As you can see here, I'm just marking this out with a pencil and a square. So each stud is going to be 400 from the last one, and they're all going to be the same length because the back wall is a level wall. It doesn't have any slope on it. So this is relatively simple at this point. All we need to do is just cut the 11 timbers for that back stud wall exactly the same length. So I'm using a chop saw. If you don't have a chop saw, obviously you can do this by hand. Just make sure you take a little bit of time, make sure the cuts are nice and straight, and you shouldn't have any problems at all. So you're going to see me here just chopping with the chop saw, and then I'll speed the video up. You don't need to see me doing this in real time for the full 11 timbers, but you get the idea. I'm just going to cut them all at once. I'm going to stack them to the left here. And also you'll notice over on the right hand side I'm making a nice little pile of noggins there which I can use later in the build, so they'll be saved for later on. Okay, so once this is done we're going to move back down to our top and bottom rails, I guess you'd call them, for the back stud wall here. I'm just going to spread these out so we can lay our studs in between. And that's all we're going to do. We're just going to use the marks that we made before, the 400 centers, to line these up and just basically lay it out ready for fixing. So again, we'll just speed through this bit. You don't need to see me laying these out slowly. And then once that's done, it's just a case of fixing the wall together. And I recommend adding 2 fixings into each stud at either end. For me personally, I'm using a nail gun here because I have a nail gun. If you don't have a nail gun, by all means, you can use a hammer to drive the nails in, or you can screw the stud wall, whichever is easiest for you, I guess. There's no right or wrong way necessarily here. The nail gun obviously is the quicker and easier way, so that's my personal preference because I have access to that. Okay, so at this point I'm working on my own. My brother's actually coming to help me later in the day, but at this point I just wanted to get going, and I've just created a little prop here just to stand the wall up so it doesn't fall over on me. And that's just temporary while I add these little braces on the side, which are basically just going to hold the wall relatively plumb and securely, just so I can fix it to the bottom here, to the floor. And then following that, I'm going to move on to the side walls. So this is not the most scientific method that I used here. And sorry about the kind of jumpy film in here, but I just wanted to kind of show you how I did it. I basically just laid 2 timbers up against the wall on the floor. And I just marked the high end and the low end because this is going to be a slope on the roof. There's going to be around 100 millimeters of fall from front to back. So I basically just spread these out as they would have been front and back stud, and then I divided the 100 millimeter fall by 6 there to get the 7 different studs, so you can see the measurements, and that meant there was a 17 millimeter fall on each stud. So by doing that, then I could lay this across, and I can also get the angle there on my bevel, which can be transferred to the saw to cut these timbers. So as I said, not the most professional way, but you know, it worked. The cuts were fine. There's probably a much better way of doing that with trigonometry or something, but I didn't know how to do it, so that way worked fine. So my brother's turned up now, and we're just going to build this wall. All the timbers have been cut. You don't really need to see me doing that again. It's exactly the same process. And nailing it together or screwing it together, exactly the same process again. And then we're just going to stand it up into the corner, and it's just a case at this point of fixing the corners of the 2 stud walls together nice and flush. And this basically is going to leave it freestanding. Then you can remove the brace from the side that was supporting the back wall, because this side wall is essentially going to counterbalance it and hold it in place. So I'm just fixing it to the floor as well. So this is just being screwed to the timber deck below us. And once that's done, we can move on to the other side, which again is exactly the same process. So there's no need to watch me cutting every single piece of timber here. Essentially, we're just going to line it all up again. My brother's just there kind of putting some weight against the other side while I fix it. And then we're both just going to lift it up into place to form the right hand side wall. And there you go. So we've actually made pretty quick progress. This was probably around 10 in the morning at this point, and we've already built 3 walls. So I think you can see that this isn't, it's not that difficult to do. I think it's probably going to be a lot easier for 2 of you to do. But, as I showed with the prop that I made before, it could be done on your own. So following this, we jumped onto the OSB on the back. Now, the main reason for this, rather than starting on the walls on the front, is I wanted to plumb the walls up. And one of the best ways to plumb them up and get them like secure and sturdy is with the OSB. Because of the machined edges, these boards are square, so you end up, because my base is completely level, it meant that the corners ended up being nice and plumb. So we started doing that before we built the front sections, the side bits that were going to hold the lintel and have the door opening. Okay, so at this point, you can see the side little stud wall here, which I didn't film actually building this, but I did film the next one. Now, unfortunately, at this point, we'd run out of timber. So we decided to build this one, and we just kind of braced it in place. And then me and my brother just finished off OSBing around the rest of the structure. And unfortunately, I had to come back to this the following day after I'd gone and bought some more timber. So we ended up finishing it at about 2:30 here. It might not have even been that. It might have been a little bit earlier. But we'd just run out of timber and everywhere was shut at that point. So the following day, well, in fact, I lied. I went to Wickes in the end, and Wickes would have been open, but I didn't think of that till the following day because this was a weekend while we were doing the work. So you can see I've just marked it out the same as a normal stud wall, but one of them's longer than the other. So this is how we've done these cheeks on the front. So essentially, you've got the bottom one there that's longer, and the top one is the shorter piece. But the marks on them for those 3 studs are exactly the same. So I'd actually run out of nails at this point, so I screwed this. So you can see that obviously you can screw these, you don't have to nail them. I had to go buy some new nails. But just, for this one wall, I just decided to screw it. And then for this next bit, I just had a short piece of wood there that I cut, and a little bit to kind of bridge across there to carry the lintel. So it's pretty simple, not terribly complicated at all. As you can see, nice light little wall, so it's quite easy work on my own here. Although at this point I did have to get some help to just line this corner up perfectly because I couldn't see around the corner while I was fixing it. But luckily my father-in-law is going to make an appearance in a couple of minutes to give me a hand. He just popped round to see the grandkids, so that was a stroke of luck. Here he is, and he just helped me by holding the wall just while I put a few fixings in it just to get it right. So once that was done, before I fixed the bottom, I wanted to make sure that the walls both lined through nice and straight. So I added a chalk line. You can see there I've put 2 little chocks of wood at the bottom with a string line. Sorry, not a chalk line, a string line wrapped around them. And basically I just used a little spacer to check at the edge of the door, to make sure they were lining through. So I probably could have got a better video of that, but unfortunately this is all I got. Following that, I just, as you can see there, I've plumbed the opening up and put some braces on, and then it's time to add the lintel. So the lintel here is just 2 pieces of 5x2, which at first I'm going to just nail them together. I'm just making sure they're nice and flush and even and lined up perfectly, and they're just going to get 8 or 10 nails. I just went my way along and just nailed it and just made sure it was fixed together. And then following that, I'm going to use some coach bolts just to really bolt it together and really make this solid. So as you can see, I've just got my drill with an auger bit in it. You can use some spade bits or just a standard wood drill bit. Just make sure it's big enough to make the hole for the coach bolts. My batteries run out, so I'll just nick one out of the nail gun. And then, yeah, we just push them through, and then it's just a case of hammering the coach bolts through and putting the washers and the nuts on them. So I'm just going to drill through them quickly. my boy there, Stanley, saying hello. And he's just going to come help me now putting these washers and these bolts on. So it's pretty simple. This is not really complicated stuff. We're just going to put the washers on and just wind these bolts up. And then it's just a case of popping it in place. Now you can see on the back of the wall there are 2 pieces of wood. These are actually 2 pieces of just decking board that I had lying about. You could use any piece of wood, but it's basically just to stop it falling off the back. And prior to fixing, I'm just going to add 2 pieces to the front as well, because obviously I don't want anybody walking under this and it falling off and clouting them on the head, myself included. So I'll just fix this in place just to make sure it's safe. And then following that, I'm just going to add some screws underneath into the lintel through the stud-work and also through the back, through the side. And this is just going to hold it securely in place. Obviously, we're going to put OSB on this as well, so that's going to hold it even more securely. So, you know, this lintel's going nowhere with, you know, it's probably going to have about 4 to 6 screws either side, if I remember correctly. And then the OSB over the top, which is obviously nailed to it. And then the roof's going to tie it in as well. So it's going to be very secure up there. Okay, so the next job here is adding the OSB. So it's just a case of cutting this and finishing the walls off basically. So I'm just here adding a little bit to the side. And then I've just got a few pieces to put on the front. Okay, so then we're going to add this piece of OSB on the front. We've got another piece for the other side, which is going to go on here. And then finally we need a piece for the top. Now I actually had to modify this a little bit because the ends of the coach bolts were just pushing it off. So as you can see here, I'm just going to chisel out a little bit from the back. Just to give enough space for that round head of those coach bolts to just sit into the OSB so it doesn't push it off and leave a gap. In hindsight, I could have countersunk them, I guess. That'd be another way of doing this, but this is the way I did it, just because I'd not thought to countersink it prior to doing this. But yeah, this only took a couple of minutes. It was pretty simple, as you can see, and it serves the same purpose. And once that's done, it just fitted on, you know, nicely. There was no gaps anymore, and it just finishes the job off. Yep, just up we go. Couple of nails. And that was the final piece of the job. So I just added about 8 nails across the top here, 10 nails perhaps. Just to hold this in place. And there we go, that's the job done. Well, this part of the job at least. So the next job is going to be adding the roof, and I think you would agree at this point it's looking pretty good. So I'll see you in the next video where we're going to be putting the roof on, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you. I hope you enjoyed it.